95.3 WDXE.
Hey, that's us, WDXE, and I have Miss Daphene Cope today.
Morning, Jeff.
It is Friends and Neighbors with yours truly, and I have Miss Daphene. Daphene, scoot the mic up just a little closer to you
Got
right
there?
there.
Okay.
Very good. And how are you this morning?
Well, I'm good enough.
Well, you look awesome. You look just fantastic,
Thank
and
you.
so good to see you. I
Same to you.
Haven't seen you in a while. We've talked a time or two, but haven't seen you in a while.
Well, I tell everybody, Jeff, that I'm worthless, and I mean to be. It's by design. So I just.
I know better than that. I know better
But
than
anyway,
that.
I don't do much.
Well, I thank you so much for getting up early and agreeing to come in and visit with us this morning. And of course, we've had the privilege of getting to visit with a lot of nice folks, and you are high on my list.
Oh, thank you,
You are
dear.
high on my
well,
list.
you're high on my list.
Well-
So there you go. There you go.
You recently celebrated an 80th birthday. You might not want me to tell that,
No, I don't care.
but
no.
but the whole town knew.
Jeff, I've been glad to be reach every age, and I've been ready to leave it and go on to something else.
Yeah.
So that was nice. My children insisted. They said, "Mother, you're having," and so then Sister Monica said to me, she said, "Embrace it and hush."
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay, I could not be here. I could be dead."
Now, how many children do you have?
I do have the three, and Don is the oldest, and of course he's involved at the has been since he's 17 years old, Lawrenceburg Power, and then Tybee is the middle child. And of course, Don was the privileged, and he was the person that everything was okay.
Yep.
And Tybee's the middle child; she was pitiful, and nobody
Yes.
loved her.
Yes.
And then Channing's the baby, and he got everything. So you know how that
That's that
is.
typical
It's
three-child
the
deal.
typical three-child things, but
Now-
they're nice people.
Now,
They
brothers
really-
and sisters.
Okay, now there's five of us.
I thought there was a.
And do you know that's amazing? We're all still at this today. I think we're all still living. We live in the county.
Yeah.
And that's unheard of, Jeff.
Yeah.
And so it's nice that we can enjoy each other, and we can we can fellowship and that kind of thing. And so I'm grateful for that. And
Well, I guess Monica is the one that I know the best. She's
yes,
more my age.
She is.
Yes.
And she is.
And I know you, of course, and Monica, but I don't know if I could name the rest.
I want to tell you, there's 21 years difference between Monica and me, and of course, I have a
21
lot of fun with that. I tell everybody that I'm the youngest, and
Yes.
that
Yes.
she's this is my oldest sister when I introduce them,
Yes.
and it'll start World War III, Jeff.
I bet.
But now Troy is 2 years older than me.
Oh, I remember Troy.
Yes, you remember Troy, and then he's been retired for quite a number of years.
Yes.
And he's married Linda Boshears from Columbia.
Right.
And then Luthine is the next to
If
me.
I'd have thought real hard, I know better than that.
And Luthine, of course, was in the banking business like 53 years, and she
Gosh,
retired
it's been a long
recently.
time since I've seen her.
Well, she's like I said, she's retired, and she kind of does her thing. We're together a lot, and then of course Tammy. Now people forget Tammy, and Tammy lives in Summertown, and she's married. Terry Pierce is her
That's
husband.
right.
And
That's
they
right.
do the
They
Summertown
got the
Bluegrass.
Summertown Bluegrass.
Just finished that. They did it twice this year. COVID kind of got into that situation.
Yes.
So they did it twice this year and just finished, and they had a real nice weekend, and it was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun, and it is well run and well managed. So they then let's see. Well, there's four of the girls, and then I am the oldest of the girls.
Yeah, and if I said I couldn't name them, but yeah, I could have.
Yeah.
My brain just didn't go there.
Well, that's all right. It's okay.
Now, I want to ask you, though, about your mom and dad.
Yes. Okay.
Now, I remember just barely, just a little bit about your dad.
Uh-huh.
And the things I remember is that he was well known for handling log homes.
Absolutely.
Some old log homes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dad and
But
mother.
give me a little bit of their history.
I'm going to tell you, mother was a Burdick, and my mother lived here in Lawrence County, and so Dad, somehow or another, I don't know exactly, I don't remember how the story went, but they met and married, and they moved.
Now, your dad's name was...
Yes, and he didn't have a name. His name was R.A.
R.A.
He was an initial, and he
R.A.
said that there was 9 of those siblings.
Now, we got to talk about the last name for just a minute.
Yes.
because some people call it Carvel and some people call it Carvel.
I don't know when we got Divine, but anyway, when we got to be called in Carvel, I don't know. In Pulaski and Giles County, we're Carvels.
Carvel.
But here we're Carvel. We're Carvels there, sorry, and Carvels in Lawrence County. So that's
Okay.
I don't know.
So I didn't mean to get off on
No,
that
no,
too
it's
bad.
okay.
But a lot of people might not know who your dad was, so it's
Right.
R.A. Carvel.
R.A. And mother was Nora, and Nora Cersei. And, you know, I had a shop downtown for a long time, and we named it Cersei. So it never did.
I
didn't
remember
know,
that.
Yeah. And so mother was just a real easygoing, kind, sweet little lady.
I remember
and
her.
Daddy
What a
was,
great lady.
Yeah, she really. And then Daddy was most spirited human you've ever seen, doing something all the time. But the background with those kids, they were Depression children. You know, that
Yes.
age were.
Yes.
Well, they didn't know anything except to work, Jeff. They worked. They were the workingest people you have ever seen. They rose at daylight, and they didn't stop till it was dark and you couldn't see.
That's right.
So that was their I guess their motivation, their whatever, and that never did stop.
Yeah.
Well, they expected that same kind of thing in us, and so they expected us to go and do and work, and I think that's where my never stopping all that comes in. And so anyway, we dad and mom, when they moved to Giles County, I think the first 3 grades of school. They lived here in Lawrence County for a while, and then they moved there. And so I went to Campbellsville
Okay.
to school. So
I didn't
then,
know that.
Yes, and so we Dad would build houses, and they could build anything. I'm telling you, it did. And those 5 boys could build anything.
Now,
So
your
they-
dad was one of 5?
one of the 5 guys.
Mm-hmm.
So they are known everywhere, Jeff, for their ability to build anything. And of course, they used old materials, and they were very, very talented. All of them were. If you'd have all new materials and build something, but to take something and make something really beautiful out of it. So Daddy got into the logs and so forth, and had always done that. So when he did, he just almost became an expertise, because people they didn't know how to do that. It was just a lost art.
There weren't many people that could.
Just couldn't. So, and he was one of the few that could take a chainsaw and put a building back up. Most people have to number the logs, and they have to, but he was just an amazing feller. So anyway, that was something he was known for. And as you remember, he built the Chamber of Commerce log
I was going to
house.
ask you,
Yes.
we had the Chamber of the original, I guess,
Yes.
one of the earlier Chamber of Commerce location.
Right.
Was there kind of across from Kroger where
Yes,
the
yes.
Speed Market store is
Yes.
now. But we had the log building there.
Well, I tell you, that was interesting. I had an office in City Hall when I went to work for the Chamber in 78. And so 78, 79 year. And so I said to Dad one day, I said, Dad, we need our own personal identity. We need to be a front door to the community. We need our own place. And he said, well, if you can find the land, I'll help construct a building. I'll help. And of course, at that time, we really promoted David Crockett, and it was
Yes.
it was a difficult thing to get tourism into your community, because people weren't into that as great as, of course, they are now,
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so he said, I'll help build. So I said, well, Daddy, you can't do that by yourself. That's too much of a investment of time and finances and everything. And I said, well, we'll get you some help. I'm telling you, everybody in town worked on that building, the police department, the fire department, and Daddy would always laugh. He said, I tell you, this bunch of professional people, they can't drive a nail in a mud hole. And there is a lot of funny stories building that building with just he would just take whoever would come. And then even my children would go up there, and they would work. And it was like I said, it's quite an experience. And I will have to tell you, I was very grieved about changing the chamber from.
Well, it was part of your life.
Yeah,
for
it
so
was.
long.
And then I just thought that was. I felt like that should have been left for tourism or any museum, anything.
Yeah.
So anyway, I grieved about that.
I'm sure.
But
I'm sure.
at any rate, administration changed, and they
Well,
didn't.
it was such a part of your life for so long.
Sure thing.
And plus the fact that you had some family that were so involved with your dad involved with it. I can understand that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of sentimentality about
Absolutely.
about us, and
Absolutely.
that kind of makes us who we are.
Yeah. Well, I will offer this up. They called Dad, and they asked him to come and look at the old courthouse.
Yeah.
And this is another thing
Oh,
that
boy.
grieved
Oh,
me.
my.
It grieved me. So
A
he
lot
said,
of people, yeah.
and the urban renewal was big time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were going to do urban renewal. It did not matter. It was going to happen, Jeff. So Daddy said, no, said we need, and he had literally moved the shirt factory in Pulaski. There wasn't anything that they couldn't do or didn't do.
Yeah.
So anyway, he said, we can jack that courthouse up. And he said, let's don't tear our courthouse down. He said, even if you don't use it for fee offices or if you don't use it, he said, it will work for you to, just to be in the center of the square. Just don't tear it down. Well, they were going to tear, and to me, one of the saddest days in the history of Lawrence County was when that building was dismantled.
Well, it's in hindsight for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
They wish it hadn't been happening.
Should not have let that happen. And, and I mean, anything can be restored. I recall.
Well, of course, it's time and money, and I guess, the economics of it were hurtful at the same time, so it probably wasn't an easy thing to do either way.
No. But anyway, that gives you a little bit of idea about who R.A. Carville was, and Daddy had a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Like no other person ever.
Yeah.
And I would always, if I was around town or any of us, and I would go in somewhere and I'd see a group of people, I would know that R.A. was in the center of it. And they used to tell me, they'd say, well, he missed his college.
Yeah.
Because he would tell stories. And Jeff, which would bring me to, I brought the copy this morning of the Carville family history.
Yeah.
And when I retired, I said, something came up, and I said, well, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And I decided that I would do a recap on their life and the siblings and the grandparents.
Yeah.
And so I was going to do that in a couple of weeks. Well, 3 years later, and interviewing everybody that I knew in the family, we did a book, and a cousin of mine is a certified genealogist. Well, I didn't necessarily want to get in the genealogy because that's bigger than the world.
Yeah.
But she did that. She's very capable and very good at it. So we coupled together, and she put the genealogy part, and I wanted to preserve the siblings.
Yeah.
And we don't do that, Jeff. Your family will pass, and you think, well, why did we interview or why didn't we do?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so we did that, and we did a portion in this book, or rather, I could remember and knew because I'm getting to be one of the certainly seniors in the Carville family, and. So anyway, we did that, and we did this Carville stories, and it's in this book. And
How
I
neat.
tell you,
that's a family treasure.
That is some funny things, and of course, like I said, it wasn't anything that they didn't do.
Well, now, your mom and dad, they were native Lawrence Countyans?
No, Dad was from Giles County, and
Okay.
he met Mother here. And of course, Mother went to Summertown High School.
Okay.
And so then he met her, and they were completely polar opposite. But anyway, somehow or another,
It seems to happen
It
that
seems
way.
to happen, and she, like I said, so then we moved to Giles County, and we lived in Giles County. Well, I guess I was third grade when we left Campbellsville. He had built a house on a farm there, sold that, and they did that. They bought and sold.
Yeah.
And so then we moved to Linville. And most rather interesting story on that. So when we moved to Linville, he built a house there, and he opened up a plumbing and hardware store on the square.
Oh, really?
On Linville, in Linville. And of course, I always say he was one of the first economic community development persons for Linville for sure. So anyway, he worked and did everything all in Giles County and in the area. Well, he would come in the afternoons, and Jeff, he'd be tired and hot where he'd, been laying rock and brick, and they just worked so hard. So he decided that he was going to build a swimming pool.
Oh, my.
Well, who in the world in I guess 77, 8, 9, whenever, 60, excuse me, that who had a swimming pool. So he goes up in the backyard, and we dug a swimming pool. Now, I mean, it was a sizable pool. It wasn't Olympic size.
Did y'all hand dig it?
Yes, we did as kids. I don't think Troy dug much. Somehow or another, he never did do anything. I did, but he didn't.
Troy didn't do it.
He didn't, no. But anyway, we dug and we dug and we dug. And Jeff, we dug this pool. Daddy poured concrete. And he ordered a industrial filter for it. Well, and of course, we paint. It was the nicest thing you've ever seen. Well, Linville had no recreation. Of course, they didn't.
Sure.
Except through the high school and that kind of thing. So Jones High School, by the way. So he says, son, I'm sort of ashamed of this. And the way he built it, it was within like a couple of blocks, and you could go up the main street, go up to the top, circle, and come down by the pool. Well, it made what you call the strip, like out here.
Yeah.
Well, you could go by. Well, at any rate, so he said, I'm sort of ashamed of this. He said, we need to share this.
Yeah.
So he asked Mother, he said, would you be willing to open this up and let it become, he said, now we'll have to charge a little bit because you got to pay for the insurance and everything.
Oh, Lordy.
We opened a public pool. Well, Troy went and took the senior life saving.
No
and
kidding.
I did. I didn't take the senior. So we lifeguard. We'd have kids out of Pulaski to come, and when we couldn't be there, they would lifeguard. We had a formal swimming pool. People came from everywhere.
That's funny.
It is funny. And when I look back on that, we had a ball. And
Well,
it
yeah.
really was fun.
What a great memory.
What kids in the whole world had a formal swimming pool?
So you're growing up these years.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and you become a young lady.
Yes.
You go graduate high school where?
Yes, in Jones School at that
Jones
time.
School.
And then, of course, it wasn't long after that, and I don't have the years and time on that, but they changed to Richland. They consolidated Giles County Schools.
Okay.
So my grandparents, once again, was getting really, they were aged and here, and they were suffering some really health problems.
Okay.
So Dad, we decided that everybody had graduated except this, it was always two families.
Yeah.
So Troy and I was the first family, and then the other children came along.
Yeah.
And so they decided that they would move back to Lawrence County.
Okay.
But they wanted me to let me graduate. Troy had already graduated, and he's in school.
Okay.
And so anyway, I didn't know what I thought about that, but anyway, so we moved back to Lawrence County, and so Dad built a log house at Marcella Falls, beautiful place up there.
Yeah.
And so we lived there, and then I was working at the bank. And I worked with your mother at
Yes.
Commerce Union Bank.
Yes.
And she was just the most lovely. And Jeff, I have to tell you a story about
Oh, no.
you on that.
Oh, my.
One morning, Patty came in, and she was just dying laughing. She was laughing so, and I said, you were little. And I said, Patty, what in the world's wrong with you? She said, well, I've been so tickled at Jeff this morning. And I said, well, what in the world is that child done now? Of course, we'd share, stories here and there. And she said, well, I got up this morning and I fixed white milk gravy. And she said, and I decided I'd crumble some sausage in it. And I said, Jeff, now your breakfast is ready, honey. Get over here and eat. And so she said, you came over to the table and sat down and said, you looked down at that and said, well, Mother, what'd you put dirt in this for? So that always just tickled us. But now, so if you want white milk gravy, you can go to one of the local restaurants here in town, and they crumble dirt in the...
Little dirt in there.
little dirt in there. But anyway, so
I'd forgotten that you and her worked together.
Yes. And
Of course, Mom was at the bank for 40
yeah,
forever.
but now I didn't stay at the bank. I stayed at the bank probably. But in the meantime, I got to back up here. I married Mickey Cope, married Mickey.
Yeah.
And really super nice guy. And so
So how did y'all meet?
well, with another date, and that's always kind of fascinating. I was dating a fella here in this community, and he was going to UNA, and he was dating a lady, and so I don't know, somewhere along the way, Mickey asked me out, and so we go. And first date I had with him, we went to see Vanderbilt and Alabama play.
Now,
And
what was he doing at the time?
he was with, he was in school, and so he did part-time, carried the mail part-time.
Okay.
And so anyway, he'd do that, you always had to have a secondary something. So when he'd get out of school, then he'd carry the mail on Saturdays, or he'd substitute. and so forth. And so anyway, lo and behold, we married, and the other couple, they married. So we just kind of switched persons. I don't know how that
Well,
took
that's the
place.
way it was intended to
well,
be.
it must be. But anyway, so Mickey and I were married 32 years, and everybody
Yes.
in this community knows that. And
Yes.
and Mickey was, I guess, 53, and he was diagnosed with cancer. And I tell you, that was a very, very difficult
I know it was.
thing.
I know it was.
And so anyway, Mickey died too young, and in my estimation, of course. God knew what was happening, but it was tough, and still is. But anyway,
is.
he and so the children were grown, and that was good. That was a blessing.
Yes.
But there was so many people, Jeff, during that time, and I look back, and you had Lanny on the other week, and of course Shorty Fields was another one of Mickey's really good friends.
Yeah.
And so during that time, and Lanny may or may not even remember this, I don't know, but we would go back and forth, and oh man, it was tough. We were going back and forth to Nashville, and everybody in this town responded. Daphne, what do you need? Is there anything we can do for you? Whatever.
Oh, I remember.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
do.
I had the transmission to come out of my vehicle. I came down one day to get Mickey's medicine, and when I started back, I was down at Pulaski Street, and the transmission just went out of the car because it was basically it was out of warranty, of course.
Well, yeah.
And so anyway, so I called Short, and I said, Short, my vehicle's gone down on me, and I said, can you? So he said, stay where you are. I'll come. So he carried me home, moved the car, towed the car up to the shop, and I know Lanny was involved in that, and I know Short was, and I know that Mr. Keaton, and probably I don't know how many more, and they put a transmission in that car, and to this day, I don't know for sure who did it.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that your community, people would come and mow the yard. I didn't have any idea who mowed the yard. It would just be, it'd just be things done. I'd stop at a gas station to get gas, and leaving, my gas would be paid for. So I look back on that and I think, what a wonderful, wonderful community. And
Yeah.
And of course, Jeff, I have to tell you, I mentioned the children, the 3 children. Well, we had Doan had 2 boys, and then then Tybee had the 1 son, and Jack Channing had the 1 son. Well, I didn't have a granddaughter. I had the 4 grandsons.
Uh-huh.
So I did everything you ever did. I went to every ball game, every football, the whole thing, went through all the baseball. I know more about baseball than anybody in this community. So anyway, and helped with all the World Series and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so one day I was sitting over at the ballpark, and Channing walked up to the car and stuck his head in the car, and he said, Mom, we got a gift for you. And I said, oh, how nice. Now they've got me flowers or candy. Now that's nice. He said, you're going to be Grandma. I said, Grandma? Well, I just was stunned. He said, yeah. Well, as it turned out, Jeff, I got a granddaughter.
Oh, boy.
And I had not had a granddaughter.
Oh, boy.
Well, 6 months after that, I had a great granddaughter.
Oh, my goodness.
So I don't have to tell you what a blessing. That has thrilled me to death to have those little girls. Well, in the meantime, I've had another great-granddaughter and another great-grandson. So my family has increased a little along the way with getting those girls that was just beyond anything I ever dreamed of. And I was 72 when I got the first granddaughter and the great-granddaughter. So there you go. And I got all the boogies and the doll beds and all of that stuff. So we play. We just play. We just play whenever they want to play, whenever they want to play.
Well, I'm thrilled for you over that.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
That was nice.
That's
was
awesome.
Great.
Well, you have been in the public eye in Lawrenceburg, in Lawrence County, for quite some time. I got your history a little bit there, and I know there's tons you could tell that we could go on and on about your early life. But then you had a public life. You had a very active and very public life.
Absolutely.
Because now you were at the bank, but now what happened right after that? Where'd you go after the bank?
Well, I had the children.
Yes.
And so I thought I needed to be at home, and Mickey, we agreed that I would, take care of the kids. Well, when Jack,
Yeah.
I call them everything. I call those kids, grandkids, names and everything. But anyway,
I don't have near that many, and I do the same thing.
I call them the dog sometime. But whenever Channing was in the second grade, that I was at home, and,
Yeah.
and I'd go over to school, and I'd help them, and I would just anything anybody needed done, So they called me and asked me, said, Daphne, would you consider coming to the chamber, and would you consider? And I said, well, I would, but I said, now I've got to work that the hours work out where I can pick up my children, and that I can. Well, I would go to work at the chamber at 9, and at that time we were in City Hall. I stayed till 1, I think. Well,
Yeah.
my children didn't actually know I was gone.
Yeah.
Well, I realized that I just love the people of the county, and I love the program of work. So we had about 90 members at that time.
Yeah.
And so after moving and getting us our own facility, their own log building up there, that we needed to expand our program of work.
Yes.
And so I was the director for the community development, and of course you had industrial development, but they were separated at that particular time.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ivan Johnston, of course, was your mayor at that time, and he had a recruiter there within the city hall, and Ivan was a wonderful, wonderful recruiter for
Mm-hmm.
anything. Ivan did a great job. So anyway, like I said, that was in the early years, of course.
What year was that when you started there? Do you
78,
remember?
78.
Okay, you told
and
me
you
that.
split that. 78, 79 is the way that worked, because your new year started, I think, in August is the way it was.
Right.
So, any rate, so I like I said, that was just a joy for me. And the economic community development as a whole. Now, Jeff, when you start on that's bigger than the world. But what you really, I guess, would focus on, and what our program of work was health care and education, recreation, and I brought some stuff that I would, do history, city and county governments you worked with, you did. Like as we said, industrial development. You worked on Main Street. You worked with the financial institutions. You
It
worked
kind of
with,
touched everything.
It was real estate. Yes, you couldn't separate that. Agriculture, the civic and service organizations, then marketing your community, your senior citizen center. And of course, spiritual aims. That was another very important piece. The law enforcement, and then chamber. We had special projects that we did, that we just pulled out and just did those special projects. And so when you look at this, some of this it really is bigger than the world. And so if we were asked, obviously we would jump in. But if we didn't, many times we would take the program of work and we would just go with it.
Yeah.
And develop some things out of the ground that was so beneficial to the community.
Yeah.
And of course, now, we're talking about 32 years. I've said many times, and history repeats this, it says that if you don't know where you've been, how are you going to know where you're going?
I guess right.
And so that's true.
Yeah.
And so we had our forefathers before us, the settlement of the Lawrence County itself, and so when you start to move along in life and start to move along in the development of, then of course things progress and the communications become greater and all that kind of stuff. So we set up a program that we thought worked for the chamber. And if you started naming names, when I look at this, it is impossible to even think about the volunteerism.
Yeah.
And to think about who did what they did. And it was just, you pick up the phone and you'd call somebody and you say, listen, we're working on so-and-so, can you help? Absolutely, what you need done. That was all over this community, north, south, and central.
I really think that a lot of that is a testimony to you, too, because I found something, I asked you earlier about spelling your name.
Uh-huh.
You remember that?
Yes.
Before, I don't know if we did it on the air or not, but I asked you about spelling your name because I had it wrong. And but prior to you getting here, I had tried to look it up online to see how to spell that name. Okay. Well, I found something
Oh,
I'm going to have to turn
gosh.
my back on you to read it
Well,
for just a
do
second.
it. Well, all
but you
right.
have to listen to this.
Lord
because,
help us.
Because the Daphene has a meaning. You know, names have meaning.
Yes.
My name means something, and everybody's name's supposed to
Yes.
mean something. So here's according to one of these searches, it says that Daphene is a name that indicates a gift of gab,
Oh.
the ability to persuade others effortlessly.
Oh.
You are expressive, optimistic, outgoing, and inspiring. That is your name.
Oh
Did
my
you ever
gosh.
know that?
No, I always thought it was a tree.
When I read that, I was like, well, that's Daphene Cope if it's ever been Daphene Cope.
Well, Jeff, that is a
Can you believe
revelation.
that?
No,
So, I mean, listen to that.
I'm very flattered by
The
it.
ability to persuade others effortlessly. And see, that's just a testimony. You could call them and just with your voice and say, I need this, that, and the other. And they'd say, well, yes, ma'am, what do you need? And,
Well, one of those things, I think, Jeff, one of the things about that is that people have to trust you.
Yes.
And they have to trust the fact. And anything that we ever did, it was not selfish. And I would have not wanted anybody to ever think that it was selfish on my part to enhance or better personally.
Yeah.
And it was never, ever intended. Now, if somebody thought that, it wasn't intended.
Yeah.
And so when we call somebody, they had the confidence in you
Yeah.
that, and that would bring me to two of my absolute favorite projects that we did. And this was just dug out of the ground.
Yeah.
I would pick up the phone and I would call anybody. And I'm talking about industry, that is small business. It didn't matter what it was.
Yeah.
And I'd say, hey, I need a little help on something. Okay, Miss Daphene, what do you need? Now, if that was in the industrial family, and I can name 2 or 3 ladies, that it didn't matter what you ask, I'll see what I can do about that. Or,
Yeah.
yes, I'll help you. So I decided in my brain that we needed to honor the professional women.
Yes.
And I'd say, these are the people that, and I would always say that when we would have the professional women luncheon, that the men would take care of the absenteeism.
Yeah.
And I worried about that 1, 2 or 3 hours that the town might fold during that time.
Yeah.
Well, we would have that, and a lot of times it would be here, back in the country cafe.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, Jeff, that was one something that we would literally, we use the term bust ourselves to do and really do well. It was so good for the small business community or anybody that wanted to send somebody, the school system, you name it, and they would send them. And it was just a perfect format.
That's still going on today.
Yes, oh yes. And so that pleases me because anything that was worth doing, then, for it to live this long, and I guess it's probably 30-something years old.
Yeah.
And that was one, and we honored those ladies, and it was their day. So that was a real special time for me.
Yes.
And out of all this other stuff that you did, I think these ladies, they're the ones that take care of this town. They are the ones that. And then we did another thing that we dug out of and that was just our own, and that was Leadership Lawrence County. And I guess I really would like to know what the alumni is on Leadership Lawrence County now.
I'm one of them.
I know you are, dear.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
I got to do that. Had the privilege of doing that.
Now that
was a lot of fun.
That is probably one of the best programs, and if if people hadn't been involved in that, or you have somebody that you would like to, that is as good a program ever. And the compliment out of that is that the state did not have a leadership program, and they called and asked, and we literally
Brandy Schultz.
we literally helped them to put a leadership program in place in the state, and we'd go to surrounding
So that
counties.
originated here?
Yes, absolutely.
The leadership
Yes.
program, that's
Yes,
pretty awesome.
It is.
That is an
and
awesome
then
thing.
and so I could go into that. That is literally a program within itself, as you know, Jeff.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things that I think during our tenure that I know. And I know in my heart, and I know for sure, that it made probably one of the most significant things. I think it was the Gulf crisis, the things was tough. And it was a tough time, and I won't go into that, but from the retail portion, from just everywhere, people were unnerved. It was like the 9/11 overtone. And so people didn't know what was going to happen. And Miss Juanita Henson, and I'm hesitant to call names because you get in trouble on that, but Miss Juanita Henson called me and she said, Daphene, can I come and see you? I said, you can, dear. She said, I've got something I need to talk to you about. And I said, okay. She said, we're suffering in our school system. She said, Daphene, we are suffering. She said, the budget isn't there. She said, I don't know what we're going to do. And I said, well, Juanita, you're not going to believe this, but I said, it's recently I've heard about a program, and it's in Memphis that they started. And it's the only program I know of in the United States, and it's called the Adopt-A-School, or called Partnership in Education.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I will go and explore. And I said, I'll see if I can get anything that going, on there.
Yeah.
So I go visit Memphis, and I remember a lady was Miss Barbara Russell, and she was involved in the national program. And they was trying to get it started throughout the United States. And didn't have very many communities to do such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we came back and we hosted a breakfast, and we invited all of our business community. Now, this is a perfect example of Lawrence County.
Yes.
And it's things that you don't see. You don't even know it. If you're out here doing your own thing and you don't even realize the importance of. So we brought this group of, it's a huge group of people that responded. So we asked them, would they consider adopting a school?
Yeah.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
Yeah.
That wasn't even up for question.
I remember.
So we went to Central, North, and South. And what we did, if we didn't have a high business community, a large business community, in Summertown at that time, they were unincorporated, they didn't have the business, then we would take a strong industry and put it with that school. Mm-hmm. So we had a coordinator within the school, and we had a coordinator within the business. And at that particular time, I think the concept and the idea was that the school system was over here and the business community over here. Well, we were able to marry that situation. And I cannot tell you the difference that made at that particular time. And the adopters it's still adopters with their school. And so they would provide resource speakers. And that was an opening for the industrial community to come in and work with the vocation at that time. I don't think it's referred to now as vocation, mm-hmm. but they could come in and work with, and it actually provided them in some places for employees, employees, and they would bring those kids in and work them in the summer. We had a program where the teachers would actually come in and do work within the companies during the summertime, and that I cannot tell you the difference that made. They would put in their budget, the business people, and they would provide copy paper or anything else at the school. They'd just make a list. Yes. Now, if they chose not to do that, then, and get involved, and they had a budget. Each one of them would have a budget. So we would couple those adopters throughout, and all schools was adopted. They were adopted by community clubs. It was just unreal, and so that was probably one of the things I think during my time that I guess I would have to say that pleased me. It
Sure.
pleased me that you had that kind of response from the community.
Well, you've been instrumental involved in so much, so many things. That's Well, I was thinking about what would have happened or not happened if people didn't get involved.
Well, Jeff,
Excuse me.
That was a volunteer organization, of course.
The involvement of not only you, but the involvement of the community to jump in and start moving and trying to make things happen.
For sure. And I'm sure that in this tenure, and once again, when I retired, Jeff, mm-hmm. I took that serious. I went to the House. They asked me, said, would you consider consulting? Would you consider coming in and I wanted to be sure that I didn't get into the micromanaging of, and I was available and am available to offer up anything that anybody thinks it would help. But, there's a new regiment on the ground now, as you might say, or a new, and so I think we need to many times step back. Now, that doesn't mean that...
Well, there have been lots of successes since you. And
sure.
Little steps, big
Sure.
steps,
Sure.
and lots of successes. And there are there's a lot of good business, industry, and development that has happened. And not everybody, not everybody is always happy with this, that, or the other. But in general, our direction has been good.
Absolutely. I was in an industrial meeting one day, and these people were entertaining coming here, and that is something, because you've got to have everything in order when you're recruiting industry, and they got to know about all sorts of resources, and you just. But I never will forget, a CEO looked at me and he said, "Well, one thing, you have preserved your downtown area," and he said, "That tells me that you care about your community." And he said, "We wouldn't consider it if you hadn't have preserved your downtown area."
That's become important.
It has become important.
It's become important, and it's happened over a period of years. You mentioned, way back when they took the courthouse down, and there was this push for urban renewal or whatever they were doing at the time, and that seemed like the right thing to a lot of people, but to a lot of people maybe not. But now, and it's happened over the past several years, there's been a real focus on trying to preserve buildings and history and all those kind of things, and I'm happy about that.
I'm really pleased about what's happening at the Main Street in downtown. Jeff, there would be something that I really would like to, your health care. Oh my gosh, that is so vital to a community. And the hospital, and I don't want you get into this, you people have all kinds of opinions, and I wouldn't this and I wouldn't that, but you let a hospital leave a community, and you're talking about one more sad and bad thing to happen in a community, and it has happened all over this nation.
It has.
So
there's a lot of consolidation.
Absolutely.
Somebody may be calling and want to talk to you.
All right, let's do it.
I don't know. Let's see. Sometimes that happens, and we're happy with it if it is.
Okay.
Hey, good morning. You want to talk with me and Miss Daphene?
Yes, sir. I sure do. I was just going to say one thing I remember.
Hang on just a second. If you want to hear him, grab a set of headphones. Can you grab them?
Right here.
She can't hear you just yet. Okay. There we go. Now then, now you can go, buddy.
One thing I can remember about Daphene and the chamber back in the day, as a young man, maybe trying to start out a business or do something, you could go down there and you felt like you was at home.
That's right.
I mean, you went in there and you sat down, and she was always so nice, and she'd work with you and do whatever you needed.
You doggone right about that. Do you know who this is, Miss Daphne?
Well, I don't catch the voice.
Well, that's Big D Tipper right there.
Oh, V Tipper. Bless you, honey.
Big Dennis.
All right. Well, let me tell you something about
that. But they did a lot of good for the community, and like I say, you could go in there, and like I say, she'd call you back there, and you sit down in her office, and whatever you needed, she'd work with you.
You are right.
And you feel like you weren't intimidated, and you just feel like you're at home.
That's right.
I love you, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you calling.
You know what? I could tell you from my own experience with you and the chamber, when I tried to get started in business and got started. He's exactly right. Y'all were wide open to help anybody try to get on their feet and make something happen for themselves.
Well, we would consult with SBA in Nashville, and Jeff, this is, I tell you, it's bigger than the world to go into all of this, but we would. Well, I guess that's my phone. I thought that was you. Well, anyway, we would do business consulting, and I could not tell you how many seminars and workshops, and then we would do the have the small business programs, as we've said, that where we just focused on, do a week-long study, and we'd have SBA to come down, and people, and then we would offer them, we'd make appointments for them to go into Nashville, and I can think of two significant business, and I noticed that they have expanded again, and the guy came in and he said, "I don't have a clue where to even start," and I said, well, we can help you with that. And he will offer now a testimony to say, he said, I didn't more have any idea. And they are significant, and they're in the north end of the county.
Yeah.
And so, that was just our privilege, and that's what we were there for,
Yeah.
is to, we were once again front door of the community of whatever those needs were.
Right.
And Jeff, I can remember you coming in, and you'd say, Miss Daphene, now help me or show me so-and-so. Well, we would know that, and you were
yeah.
young, and you all have done a wonderful job.
Well, we've been very blessed to be in a community that's supported us and having people like you to help us. That's right.
Well,
I gotta ask you about some other.
Sure,
I want to
sure.
steer you along with your role here.
Okay.
There had to be some fun stuff going on because let me tell you, I got to spend quite a bit of time in the Kiwanis Club.
Yes.
Okay. And ended up they embraced me and took me in as a greenhorn and you were kind of an honorary member for years of the because at that time women weren't in the club.
Yes.
But you kind of were. We had adopted you. You took care of us in that regard.
That was probably.
And then I think you became the official first female member of the Lawrenceburg.
That's correct.
Eventually, but anyway, speaking of that kind of thing, there are all these clubs and organizations that we have that are community clubs and do all the things that they do. We've got community events. Now, one of the things that the Chamber's done too is the Christmas parade.
Absolutely, 100 years.
Now that's been going on for I don't know how long.
Well, the Chamber's organized it, I think, in 1949. I think I'm right about that. I'll stand corrected, but 49.
Yes.
And I think the first Christmas parade was, and so that's the largest gathering, I guess it still is, one of the largest gatherings to bring the county together than any other known event at one time.
Yeah.
Now, you can't hardly believe that, but
It really
that's true.
is. A lot of people get in and participate in that. And it's always fun, always fun. And then I thought about other events that came along. And when did Davy Crockett Days start? Do you remember
that?
And because I think I remember the JCs got involved.
They did. They
and
did
started
do that.
that.
And Jeff, my goodness, that was probably
was when I was a
78,
boy.
79, somewhere along in there, I would guess, and maybe a little sooner
I
than
think it
that.
might have been sooner than that.
May have been,
Yeah.
but that's difficult. One of the things that I think was certainly that we would look at for just a minute this morning, and that is the recreation.
Oh.
And that is it's just phenomenal. We had. We brought in TVA once, and they were good to assist you in stats and that kind of thing. Well, that's sort of what we were, was a stat organization in a sense, and so they would come in and they would do. So they did this thing as how money was spent in Lawrence County. And I don't know where they gather the information. I would assume probably credit cards or I don't know where they get that data. And it may be that it's sent back into the state and they were able to, I don't know. But one of the things that, in getting a branding and know who we are in Lawrence County and embrace that. And if that's who you are, then do it well.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that they found was monies was spent on hunting, obviously, and fishing in Lawrence County.
Really?
And they said that we needed a sporting good to bring in a sporting goods store. If somebody wanted to invest, that was a real. Well, we already had a sporting goods store in the south end of this county that now is unreal. The
really
response that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so we look, and then of course the fishing. We had Laurel Hill Lake. We had VFW Lake. And then the proximity to, we didn't want, people to have to drive out of the county, but people are going to go to the Tennessee River.
Sure.
Now they're going to do that.
Sure.
And that's one of our sell points. We would have people call us about the Buffalo River, and they'd want to float the Buffalo River at its origin. I'd say, well, now that's at Alexander Springs, and you're going to have to carry your canoe for a while before you can get in. And then, Jeff, we would have things at the Crockett Theater. This is a right interesting note. I learned that they were going to tear the Crockett Theater down. That was a thing. And I mean, it was set. I said, I will lay down in front of Crockett Theater and you will dozer me down. You will not tear that theater down. Now, I was ugly about that. I sort of threw a fit on that. And it just happened that I was there at that time. That don't make me wonderful. It don't make me, but I said no.
Well, I think a lot of people would have joined you.
Well, they would have. And so that was being discussed. And I said, absolutely not. And I noted down several years back the Nashville Symphony. We would bring that in, expanded the stage, and that's the one place that they would come out of Nashville is to the Crockett Theater because of the acoustics. Because
I remember the first time they come.
Absolutely. And so we brought them in, and that was a sellout for years and years and years. And of course, the Christmas Pops for 25 and 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And the community theater, they would, oh my gosh, the things that they've done, and they're performing, arts and all. School events, and I look at, and then performance series. We did the fashion shows down there. We would do membership meetings. We'd do seminars, law enforcement, James Vaughn, the Fairs to the Fair and other beauty pageants. And then, of course, the visual arts is right next door to that. And then in the recreation, you look at the museums that the old jail museum, James Vaughn, the Passarella Museum, and, our golf courses. And you just cannot know the money, the ballparks. We have some of the finest ballparks anywhere in the country. You would have to know the origin of that. And sometime or another, if you want to talk about that again, or if the community has any interest, I cannot tell you the folks that it took. Mickey was really involved in the very beginning of the little over behind the old armory, Lord help.
Yes.
And then we came from there over to behind.
That was where I played ball.
Yes, you did. Of course you did. And then they went on over to behind the new armory, and then over to these complexes. And we were there for all of that kind of thing. And of course, education. We got to touch on that for just a minute. The origin of the Columbia State Project, and I mentioned Opta School, but from where that came from and where it is today, and
we kind of forget about all the things and the efforts that have been made over the years.
Where have you been, and where are you going?
And our younger people need to hear how this happened.
It didn't just all of a sudden. I was serving on a committee in Columbia State. And at that particular time, and you served on coalitions and all the things that in other communities.
Right.
And so I was serving on that, and I was in the meeting one night, and I said, I want to ask you something. Why does Lawrence County, we're doing the drive-in, we have over 700 people enrolled up in Murray County rather. And so I said, would y'all consider coming and looking at us, and let's have our own facility down there? Well, we don't know. Well, Paul's hands comes down, and I remember, I'm going to name a name or two here, but I remember Paul Plant was there, and I remember that I think Robert Pulley and maybe one or two more.
Yep.
So they came, Jeff, and they visited us. And Paul, now you had to know Paul Sands, he was a sight. And so anyway, he said, well, I'll tell you, he said, so we carried him over to the old Lawrenceburg Public. Nope, that won't do.
Yep.
So we carried him 5, 6 more places. Nope, all I'm going to do, if you'll have to build us a facility. If you'll build us a facility, I'll provide you with the staff and I'll provide you with equipment. Jeff, this community raised $450,000 from the private sector.
Yeah.
In the meantime, they had the fire at the library, and we raised $86,000 to help get that. Now, you're talking about a community to give and talking about a community to jump in.
That. You're right about that. And
it
continues today.
Absolutely, it does.
It really, really does.
It does.
It continues today.
It's just...
I think you and I could go on all day.
All day. All day.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Well, we're getting close. I got a couple of minutes left before we have to hit the hard break here at 8 o'clock. But I'm so thrilled that you came in.
It's my pleasure.
When I talked with you and asked you, I was like, this is going to be so good. It's awesome.
It is.
And I learned a little bit. I learned a little bit about your history that I didn't know. About your early life, and which was interesting to me. And of course, I had forgotten that you and Mom worked together at the bank.
She was a darling.
As younger ladies.
Patty Sue. Love Patty.
Yeah, she was.
And your dad, and he would always go to Bluegrass, and I can still see him
he was still
up
a
there.
Bluegrasser.
would go up there.
So much.
He would do
Do
his
you remember?
clocking.
Do you remember when I was the year I was president of the Kiwanis?
Yeah,
We
uh-huh.
had your sister and brother-in-law sing
Yeah, sure,
and play at our
sure,
dinner at our annual dinner.
absolutely.
So we had bluegrass music for the entertainment.
Last week at the Bluegrass Festival, or this past weekend, is a group from Georgia, and they are top line. They are the best you've ever heard. And so the guy stood up and he said, I don't know if you people here in this audience know how to appreciate this venue and know how to appreciate. He says this is one of the best managed, one of the best. And he said, we love coming to Lawrence County. We love coming to this event.
Well,
He
I love
said,
living here, don't
yeah,
you?
that's what I've said. And I said, my word, Jeff, I would you want to live anywhere else?
Why would you want to live anywhere else? Miss Daphene Cope, God
Okay.
bless you, hon. Thank you so much for coming in. this
Thrilled
morning. I'm
me
going to
to
have
be
you
here.
back again one of these days.
I would
I've been
love-
thinking about having several people come in all at once.
Do
You
that.
and we get a big wad in here.
Oh, do that.
Then I'd have to have a 4 or 5 hour show. Probably.
Do it. We'll come anytime. You
Miss
just tell us.
Daphene, thank you, hon.
Thank you, dear.
Well, take care.
Killed in Russian shelling at a market in eastern Ukraine.
The missile strike took place in Kostiantynivka in eastern Ukraine. At least one of the dead is a